back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Kyla and I'm coming at you with my top books of 2024. I'm doing this a little bit different than I have ever done before because I have a very clear top 5. I'm cheating a little bit, you'll see what I mean, but I have a very clear top 5. The rest of them, I could not tell you what order they need to go in. So I'm just gonna talk about them. When we get to the top 5, I will let you know the order because those are pretty set in stone. The back half, I couldn't tell you. I know that I loved them. I know that I enjoyed them. Some days I feel like I enjoyed some more than others. I just have no clue on the ordering. So is that cheating a little bit? I think so, but you know what? It's my list. It's fine. It's fine. So coming in at number 10-ish is Hidden Pictures by Jason Recolleck. I read this in the summertime and really enjoyed it. Typically, I am not a fan of books that are from a kid's point of view. Most of the time, I find that a little bit unbearable. But for some reason, this one just really worked. It's not entirely from the kid's perspective, which is why I think it worked, because it wasn't the entire book. It was just little snippets here and there. And the way the book was told really made you fall in love with this little boy. Now, this is a backlist, so I won't spend too much time going over the synopsis with you. Basically, in this one, we are following Mallory, who has had a rough past and she is looking for a fresh start. So she applies to be a nanny for this little boy. And the interview is a little bit off, but they end up giving her the job and she starts to interact with this little boy who draws some very interesting pictures. And I feel like that's really all you need to know going into it. I feel like I made this book way more anxiety-ridden than it needed to be, but that's what I loved about that. I was expecting all of these things, and even though it wasn't as over the top as I was making it out to be, I still had a great time while reading this. It's definitely one that is going to stick with me, and I highly recommend, while I do enjoy the audiobook for this, reading in tandem with the book, because in the book are the actual drawings of the pictures from the little boy, and let me tell you, they are disturbing. They are disturbing. As the book goes on, they get worse and worse and worse, and it's just incredible to see the drawings in there too and really have that visualization, and I loved that about it. It almost made it kind of interactive in a way. And I love the relationship between Mallory and this little boy. They had just such a sweet connection, and he was just such a cutie, and I loved their interactions and everything. I just think it was so cute, and the way the book goes and the ending, it's one that I still think about. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think this is the horror that has really stuck out with me throughout the entire year. I didn't read a ton of horror, but this one was by far my favorite. Next, we have Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I feel like I'm going to be seeing this on so many favorites lists, and for good reason. This book is incredibly well done, and the messaging behind it is even better. In this one, we are following multiple perspectives, and they are all from the women who were affected by the crimes of Ted Bundy. They never actually say his name in this book, which I highly appreciate, because it is not glorifying anything that he's done. It is from the women's point of view that were affected by him, and that's how it should be. We should be through all of this true crime phase, and don't get me wrong, I am a true crime junkie, okay? I definitely participate in that side of it, and I get how disturbing that can be, and how from the family's perspectives or from the victim's perspective, how it seems so glorified. I completely understand. I will admit it is something that I still consume though. I enjoy true crime. I can see both sides of it, and this book is definitely highlighting the fact that we should not be glorifying the crimes of sick individuals that commit these crimes. It should not be about them, and I do feel like there are a lot of platforms out there that do focus focus on the victims and make the stories of the victims and the families heard more so over that. There are a few platforms out there, a few podcasts, shows, whatever, that do that, but for the most part, a lot of them are just highlighting what has happened and not necessarily from the victim's point of view. This book took that and ran with it in theme, and this is highlighting the women who were affected by him. They never say his name, which again is just the absolute point, is it not? We have the woman in the sorority house, we have one of the girlfriends, we have a reporter, we have multiple points of view in here, and they all end up connecting in the end, and it's just a beautiful story, and it's extremely powerful, but again, it was extremely well done, and it's not in any like way sensationalizing what happened. If anything, it really goes into like the nitty-gritty and emotion that and the aftermath and just the absolute horrific trauma that these women went through. Obviously, look up trigger warnings because there are a lot, but I do think it's an important read regardless. I also really enjoyed the audiobook. One of the other things that I really loved about this as well is it has that aspect of like what's wrong with the media in these situations too, and how the media can paint these victims in such a negative or stereotypical light, and this book handled that theme really well. You know, you have all of these male reporters and these male lawyers and all of these male points of view that are going to twist things or say things happen for a certain reason or what have you, and then you have all of these women coming together and being like, absolutely not. This is what happened. This is how you should look at it. And also just how all of these women were like completely looked down upon. Oh my God, it covers literally everything you could possibly imagine and done in such a beautiful, and I don't want to say poetic way, but in just a real raw way. And I just think this is absolutely incredibly well done, well written. I am excited to see what this author comes out with next. So yeah, it had to be on this list. Normally in my favorites list, I try not to include sequels, but this was like a year for sequels or parts of a series that I've just really enjoyed and that just kept in my mind. So I had to include some of them in here. I'm sorry about it, okay? It just had to happen. And the next one is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel to Divine Rivals, which was one of my favorite books. Was it last year or the year before? I'm losing track of time. Regardless, it's one of my favorite books of all time. I love Divine Rivals, and this is the sequel, the final part, and oh my goodness, did it deliver. I'm going to keep my explanation of this very vague because I don't want to spoil anything in case anyone has not read Divine Rivals yet, but Divine Rivals leaves off on quite a cliffhanger. So we are following up the aftermath of that and trying to solve everything that is going on while also adding in a really like new interesting conflict and layer to this, which I really enjoyed. This was heartbreaking. I definitely cried at the end, but it also was really powerful. I loved how not everything got wrapped up in like a nice little bow, because that's just not real life, is it? And while obviously this is fantasy, and while there are parts of it that don't necessarily sit in real life, it's definitely not like out of this world, and I love the way that everything was handled, and also just that is what happens, you know, not everything wraps up so incredibly nicely, and I just really enjoy that. I love when books go there, and it doesn't always have, like, it has a happy ending, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily everything has a happy ending, and I just really enjoy that. I love when that happens, especially in a fantasy book, because that's just, fantasies can be nitty gritty, they can go dark, and I love that this book delivered. I don't know what else I could say about this without spoiling anything, so I will just say the series is incredibly written. It makes you care about these characters in a way that you just do not expect. Book one leaves you needing more, and this was the perfect conclusion. I don't think I would change a single thing about it. And all I will say is Iris and Roman forever. Next we have my only other thriller kinda sorta, on this list, which is actually just such a crime, but I read a lot of fantasy this year. I also got into romance this year, and I just really struggled with thrillers this year. I feel like there were none that really stuck out to me. I need 2025 to be the year of like the thriller redemption, because it's a genre that I love, but I'm just so struggling with it, and I know I'm not alone in that. Anyways, my next favorite is Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth. This caught me off guard. I was pleasantly surprised by this. This was my first Sally Hepworth experience, and I definitely will be going into her backlist. I've seen hit or miss things about a lot of her books, so I feel like this one was very well loved, so I don't know if some of her backlist is gonna be for me, but I'm definitely willing to explore it. This one, we are following three sisters who grew up. They have a rough kind of childhood experience, and they were brought up by this foster mom called Miss Fairchild, I believe is her name, and that just tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? Miss Fairchild was definitely not the best foster mom. She had all these rules for them. She had all of these punishments. She was unpredictable. So this follows their experience growing up in the house. So you get like the past timeline and then the present timeline where there has been a body found underneath the house that they grew up in, and they all have to come kind of back together, and the police are trying to figure out who it is, what happened through their experience growing up, and they're kind of reliving and hashing things out in the present day. I love the sister relationship in here. It is definitely raw and gritty, and I definitely feel like it's what I can imagine an accurate depiction of what kind of an experience would be like, a growing up in a home like that and then kind of splitting ways and coming back together with their relationship. Now, obviously, I have not grown up in foster care, so I can only imagine it, but I feel like the real and the rawness and just like kind of what they're going through and their emotions, I feel like were depicted in a really real way. I might be alone in that, so, and that could be, you know, my privilege, so obviously let me know if it's not, but I feel like their experiences and their feelings were really truthful, and I just love the way that they connected and were helping each other through, but also leaving space for each other. I just thought it was really well done, while also being, I mean, this is definitely like a family, like psychological thriller, but also being like having those thrillery bits of like reading what happened to them back then and their experiences, and then obviously the present day and the body and trying to figure that out. And this had one of the best plot twists that I have read in a really long time, and it's one that I still think about. While not being completely unpredictable, it was just so well done and delivered so good, and I just think about it all of the time. So it had to be on this list. Like I said, if this is like how she does plot twists, I will be 100% reading more from her. So please let me know if you have loved this and then loved another Sally Hepworth. Where should I go next? What's my next Sally Hepworth? Let me know in the comments. My last favorite before we get into the top 5 was A Fragile Enchantment by Alison Saft. This is like Bridgerton in book form, and I loved it. Specifically season 2 with Anthony and Kate. This is season 2 in a book, but also Make It Magic, and I just had the best time. This is 100% the perfect spring read. So if you're going to read it, if you haven't yet and you're going to read it, please read it in the springtime because it is the perfect vibes. I mean, this cover, are we kidding? Are we kidding? The writing in here is absolutely gorgeous, but without being too flowery. I also love how we have those Regency vibes, but we also, like Bridgerton, have a lot of queer characters and diverse characters as well. I just loved it. It was like, oh my god, how else do I describe it other than Bridgerton wrapped up in a book? In this one, we are following Neve, and Neve has a special ability. She's a seamstress, and she has this kind of magic where she can weave emotions and feelings into the fabric of the pieces that she makes, and she is hired by the royal family to make the garments for the upcoming royal wedding, and one of the people that she has to make a garment for is Kit, and Kit is one of the royal family members, and he is grumpy. He is so grumpy. He's rude. Just so over being part of like the political side of things and his family, and like wants nothing to do with it, but he's kind of being forced to do so. And as you can imagine, the story takes off from there, and that's all you need to know. Oh my goodness. Like I said, it's season 2 of Bridgerton, specifically Anthony and Kate's story. I mean, it's not like done after that, but that's what it reminds me of. So if you enjoyed that, you will enjoy this book. It also has like all of those magical elements to it as well. There's a lot of talk of like plant life, and the descriptions in here are really well done as well. And I just had an absolute grand time while reading this. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, it's a perfect spring read, and it's one that I still think about all the time. Okay, we are cracking into the top 5. These are my top 5 favorite books of the year. They are in a particular order. I did cheat a little bit. You will see why in just a second, but first let's start with number 5. This is the other kind of sequel that I have on this list. I know, but like I couldn't not include this. Wisteria by Adeline Grace. If you know me, if you have watched any of my videos in the past, you will know how obsessed I am with the Belladonna series. This series is one of my favorites of all time. I love it. It is a YA gothic fantasy. It's also romantasy as well, and I just absolutely devoured Belladonna. I loved it so much. Foxglove, the middle book, was just okay for me. I mean, it's still a 4-star book, but it definitely has like middle child syndrome. So I was a little bit nervous going into this book of like, what is Wisteria going to deliver? Although we follow a very specific character in this book, and I'm not going to give too much away again because I don't, and for anyone who hasn't read the whole series, I don't want to give anything away, but we do follow a very specific character, which we have been waiting for. If you've read the other 2 books, you know we needed this perspective so badly. This was just so incredibly well done. It was everything that I could have wanted in an ending for this series, and then some. This again has one of the best plot twists. Let me tell you, do not sleep on fantasy plot twists because they are some of the best that I have ever read. If you are a thriller reader and you crave that like good plot twist, fantasy can sometimes deliver that. I have found that. I was so nervous to get into fantasy, but as a thriller reader, I really appreciate it because there's always something thrown in that catches me off guard that I wasn't necessarily expecting because I'm not reading a thriller. You know, it's not something that I'm like thinking about, and then something gets thrown in there and I'm like, whoa, not expecting that. And that's how this book not ends, but there is something that happens in the back half of this book where you're like, holy crap, I was not expecting that by any means, and it's delicious, and I loved it. Loved it so much. I think this was the perfect book to round out the series, although I'm heartbroken there's not going to be more. I feel like I could definitely read more in this series, but I appreciate the way it ended. I appreciate the way this book kind of unfolded. There are very dark themes throughout this entire series, so definitely look up trigger warnings. Even though it is YA, there are still a lot of dark themes, and I mean, one of the main characters in this series is death, and we are dealing with death the entire time. But again, such good plot twists too. Like I said, I can't really go into a whole lot about this book without spoiling the rest of the series, but it had to be on my favorites list because this was the ending that I was hoping and dreaming for, and I got it. Okay, this is where I cheat. This is where I 1000% cheat this list, but I make this list and I have no regrets. So my next one is not necessarily one, okay? It's just an author because I couldn't pick just one, okay? Like I said, I got into romance this year, and it was very difficult to narrow down out of these 3 specifically which one was my favorite. And so I decided to just pick the author as my favorite. Really my favorite author that I discovered this year, but definitely there's just no way I could pick between these 3 books, and it's Abby Jimenez. I mean, how does one choose? Like, is that even allowed? I think that goes, like, defies against all odds, like, what you're, no. Look, I can't even fathom picking one of these. So I just had to say Abby Jimenez as a whole is my fourth favorite of this year, because these books, they had me in a chokehold this year. These are the romances that I compare everything else to, every other romance, I should say. And this is what I want my romances to be. I am not an overly, this is gonna sound so ridiculous, but like, in my romance, I don't want just romance, okay? I want other things. I want life things. I want substance, okay? I want life stories. I want conflict that actually makes sense and not as just like thrown in there as third act conflict. I want it to actually be real life worldly things that I can relate to and go, oh, I know how that would come into play. And that's what these books do, okay? All of these characters, and like, do I think that you have to read them in order? No. But do I suggest reading them in order? Absolutely. So I did. I read them all in order, and I highly recommend doing it that way. But like, all of these characters have so much more to them than just the romance going on, and I love that. It was also just the perfect amount of spice without being overly spicy. I am not a spice gal, okay? I don't care about that in books. If it's in books, like, it's fine, but I don't seek it out. If anything, I'll probably skim over it because I just don't care. Okay, it's just not something that I need. I want more of the substance and more of the life stuff than I do the spiciness. And these have just like the perfect amount, and I just love it. I can't pick a favorite. If you would ask me to, that's like picking a favorite child. And no, I shall not do it. So all I can say is that she is a favorite author. I cannot wait to read her next one. Cannot wait to read her next one. I still have a few others from her that I haven't read yet. These are obviously the main ones, but I know she has some other backlist ones that I'm hoping to get to in 2025. But yeah, Abby. It had to just be Abby and not necessarily picking a single book. She's incredible. She knows how to write a romance. I am a huge fan now and forever will be. All right, top three. So coming in at number 3 is The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer, which I am actually shocked at, because I had her first one, The Wishing Game, on my favorites list last year. Was it last year? It might have been the year before. Again, I lose track of time, man. What is time? But I had The Wishing Game on my favorites list, and I was like, when I saw that she was coming out with this one, I was like, can she do it again? Can she do it again? It is very rare. I mean, I say that where I just showed you 3 books from an author, but like, especially in the fantasy genre, I feel like very rare where an author can deliver multiple 5 stars back to back. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head is Shauna Maguire with the Wayward Children series. Like, those, like, obviously multiple 5 stars back to back, but like, especially in standalone fantasy, because this is standalone, has nothing to do with the first one, I feel like that's very rare, and she delivered. She is the epitome of cozy but heartfelt. If you like books like House in the Cerulean Sea, if you like the Wayward Children series, if you like Legends and Lattes, books like that, you will be a fan of Meg Schaefer. Something that I love about Meg Schaefer's writing is that she packs so much nostalgia into her books. She did it with The Wishing Game too. Like, you just instantly felt like you were a kid reading the story again, and she did the same thing with this one, and I just think that's so hard to do back to back with standalones, but for somehow she just pours that into her writing, and it works so incredibly well. This one is themed after the Chronicles of Narnia, like, has heavy themes of that in there. It's not like a retelling by any means, but you can definitely tell where she pulled that inspiration from, as well as Peter Pan and like the Lost Boys and that kind of thing. Oh my gosh, there's just so much nostalgia packed into this. She also talks a ton about Fleetwood Mac in this one, and let me tell you, as a Fleetwood Mac stan, I was kicking my feet and screaming at this one. This one, we are following Jeremy and Rafe, and they went missing when they were children in West Virginia for a certain amount of time, and then they came back, and as time went on, they kind of grew apart and kind of stopped talking about their experience because they realized that maybe it was a little bit different than what kind of everyone could handle them talking about it, and it really affected them in their own individual ways. And then one day they come across Emily, whose sister has also gone missing in the same area that they did as they were when they were children, and they help her try to find her missing sister. There's so much more that goes into it, and there's so much depth that goes into it, but it's kind of the rough synopsis. And as you can imagine, being the lost story and having all this nostalgia, it's very whimsical, it's very heartfelt, it goes very deep. There's also a lot of heavy topics in this one too. Like, I was crying while I was reading some of this, and like, I'm not like a big crier when it comes to books. Like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. And this one had me crying at the end. This one also has a lot of queer and diverse characters, which we love. And that is one of like the heavy themes throughout this one. So just know that going into it. It's not all beautiful, and it covers a lot of difficult topics around queer characters, so just be mindful of that. But I really think don't turn away from it because of that. Read it because of that. It is difficult, but it is so worth it, and I feel like it was done really well. It also has a lot of themes of like confronting your past and addressing like trauma and that kind of thing. So there's like this lighthearted, whimsical side of this, and then there's also this really like heartfelt tug at your heartstrings, really hit you in your feels side of it. And I feel like Meg Schaefer toes the line of that really well. While it still makes it an enjoyable reading experience, it also drives home those topics, and it's just handled with such care, but also with just incredible writing. It's also hilarious. This book is so funny, like laugh out loud moments. I was dying. So it just, like I said, toes that line of like perfect heartfelt while also being a fun, whimsical story. I cannot recommend this book enough. If you need to look up trigger warnings, please do so, but know that those themes are handled with care, in my opinion, and I would just recommend this book to everyone. My number 2 favorite book of the year, I actually read back in January or February, so that's how long it has been sitting on my favorites list. And honestly, these top 2 have been sitting there pretty much all year round and just haven't budged, is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. When I tell you, this is the coziest book, this is the coziest freaking book. If you loved House in the Cerulean Sea, you will love this book. Very much along the same lines, and I absolutely loved it. In this one, we are following Micah Moon. Micah Moon is a witch, but in this world, witches are not allowed to actively practice like outwardly. They have to hide their magic. So she actually does magic on her social media, like she's actually doing it, but people think she's faking it. And one day she receives a DM from someone going, "I know what you're really doing, and I would love for you to come to our school and help teach these younger witches how to use their magic." And she's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'm not doing real magic. But she thinks about it and takes him up on his offer, and she goes to this school, the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and teaches these 3 young witches how to use their magic. And we have very whimsical characters that run the school. They are cute, a gay couple, and oh my god, I love them so much. And then we have Jamie, who's the groundskeeper, who like grumpy, and as you can imagine, things happen there. And it's just perfect. It's a cozy romantasy. It is very much heavy on the cozy, and what I loved about this, or one of the things that I loved about it, is that the 3rd act conflict in this, you would expect it being like a little bit on the romance. 3rd act conflict would be between the 2 of them. It actually involves everyone, which is something that I really appreciated. While it is romantasy heavy, the 3rd act conflict actually involves everyone involved in this book, and I just really enjoyed that part of it. It's cute, It's funny, it's heartfelt, it's cozy. This is exactly the kind of book that you want to just curl up with the blanket and some tea and some treats and just devour and have yourself a good time. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll be rooting for them, you'll be wrapped up in the romance, and it's just everything that you could ever want in a cozy book. And I just need more from this author. I know she has another one coming. It's gotten pushed back so many times. I really hope that it comes out in 2025 because I need another one of these immediately. All right, we're here. Number 1. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone if you have watched my videos at all this year. I have raved about this book time and time and time again, although I haven't talked about it in a hot second, so let's rave about it some more. My favorite book of the year was Heartless Hunter. I need everyone to be reading this. I need everyone to be reading it, and I also need the follow-up book. Like, I need it now. I need it now. I can't wait any longer. I need it. This book is absolutely incredible. The magic in here is unlike anything I have ever read before. It's so unique and yet so powerful at the same time. In this one, we are following Rune, and we are following Rune in the aftermath of the revolution, where Rune is a witch, but in this aftermath, witches are very much looked down upon. They are put to death, essentially, very much like Salem witch trials time or whatever. So Rune has to spend her time just kind of melding into society, acting like a socialite, etc. Or at least that's what she does by day. By night, she is like a vigilante. She is a badass bitch who is rescuing the witches that have been taken and seized captive, essentially, and she releases them. Now, at the same time, there are these people, the witch hunters, who are going out trying to find all of the witches and punish them. So she's kind of working, against all of that. During one of her rescues, she comes across Gideon Sharp, who is a witch hunter, and she maybe tries to pursue him for information, and things go off from there. There's a lot of layers in here. There's also a love triangle, which is just so well done in my opinion, because it's one of those, you don't know who you're rooting for until the very end, and I love that. It kind of sways you in different directions throughout the book. But what I love about this book, for the most part, I love the plot too, I love the writing, everything, was the magic, because the magic is centered around a woman's cycle. And that, yes, absolutely, we need to be talking about how much power that gives a person. And I just loved it so much. So we have the magic system that essentially, when a woman gets her cycle, that's when her magic kicks in, and it ebbs and flows according to her time of the month and what cycle and what phase she's in. Yes, 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 yes. As someone who is really into learning more about the women's cycle and what that means and how it makes you feel and how you feel at different times and that kind of thing, as someone who is really into it, I took heavy appreciation into this, because I was like, yes, absolutely. We need to be turning that conversation into something that's kind of taboo and out there, and turn it into something that's really powerful. And when you have somebody something like a witch who is fueled off of that, oh my goodness gracious. I didn't need to read anything beyond that. I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever read in my entire life. I love this. I love it, and I need more conversations to be happening around the cycle like this, in such a fierce way, and I just absolutely loved it. It's stuck on my mind. This book leaves you with an incredible cliffhanger at the end where you just want the next book immediately. So while also having this cool magic system, the plot was incredible, the romance was incredible, I loved the love triangle, I loved the writing, I loved the dark themes, I loved the socialite side of things. This had everything that I could ever want in a book, all wrapped into one, and I just need the second one. I need it, I need it, I need it. I need more in this world. I need to know what happens after this one ends. Oh my god, thank goodness it's coming soon. Thank goodness. But yeah, Heartless Hunter had to be at the top. That magic system, I don't need to say anything else. And that is my top books of 2024. So I would love to know what your top books were. Maybe do like, if you could leave your top 3 in the comments. Also, based on this list, if you have any other recommendations, I would love to hear it. If some of these are your favorites, let me know. Let's just talk all things books in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I cannot wait to see what 2025 brings in the name of reads. I'm so excited. Oh my goodness, I just can't wait. I cannot wait. Until then, I will see you in another video very, very, very soon. Bye!
With you and I, the future